How do you spend a reported $400 million on a single video game, only for it to completely collapse in just 14 days?
Concord, a game that seemingly nobody asked for, has launched, and not only did nobody seem to care, virtually nobody played the game either.
Concord is one of the biggest disasters in PlayStation history.
Concord has been cancelled after 11 days.
This isn't just a story about a failed product. It's a story of ambition curdling into outright hubris. It's about how one of the biggest and most respected names in entertainment watched a nearly $500 million bet go up in flames in the time it takes for a free trial to expire. This is the story of a failure so immediate and so stunning. It didn't just cost a fortune, it cost an entire studio its existence and sent a violent shockwave through the video game industry. This is the story of Concord. To truly understand this unmitigated disaster, we have to rewind to the early 2020s. Sony's PlayStation was on top of the world, dominating the market with its string of critically acclaimed single-player blockbusters. But they weren't satisfied. They wanted a new prize: the vast continuous revenue of live service games. Then CEO Jim Ryan declared a bold and aggressive new mission: launch over 10 of these online, ever-evolving games by 2026. The goal was simple: to capture a slice of the billions of dollars that games like Fortnite and Apex Legends were raking in, not from initial sales, but from endless in-game purchases. The glittering centerpiece of this entire strategy was a developer called Firewalk Studios. Formed by industry veterans, Sony saw so much promise that they acquired the entire studio in April 2023. Before its first game was even properly revealed. That game, which had been in some form of development for nearly 8 years, was Concord, a 5 versus 5 hero shooter. Inside the walls of PlayStation, the hype was reportedly off the charts. Executives didn't see Concord as just another game. They saw it as a tentpole title. According to internal sources, this was meant to be the beginning of a massive new franchise. A universe with Star Wars-like potential. So Sony didn't just fund a game, they invested in a multimedia empire. While the exact figure is disputed by some, multiple reports citing internal sources allege the total cost ballooned to a staggering $400 million, a number that would place it among the most expensive games ever made. With the full backing of PlayStation's money and marketing machine, Concord was, in their minds, simply too big to fail. But as the launch approached, a storm of red flags began gathering on the horizon, each one a signal of the impending doom. First, and perhaps most baffling, was the price. Concord was set to launch at $40. In a genre completely dominated by free-to-play titans like Overwatch 2, Valorant, and Apex Legends, this was a suicidal decision. The entire business model for these games is to remove every barrier to entry, let millions of players in for free, get them hooked on the gameplay, and then sell them cosmetic items. Sony instead built a $40 wall in front of an unproven game in a deeply saturated market. Ironically, this decision came just months after Sony itself had published Helldivers 2, a cooperative shooter that became a smash hit, proving that a lower, more accessible price point could build a massive loyal community from day one. Concord seemed to ignore this lesson completely. Then, there was the game itself. After years and years of development, Concord felt generic. During the beta period in July 2024, player feedback was mixed at best. While some praised the gunplay, many found the characters uninspired, lacking the personality and iconic spark of their competitors. The retro 70s sci-fi aesthetic failed to connect with a wide audience, and critically, the gameplay offered no unique hook to pull players away from the games they were already deeply invested in. The beta saw weak player numbers and generated almost zero organic buzz online. The alarm bells were screaming. The marketing was another colossal failure. For a game with a blockbuster budget, its presence was practically invisible. When the official trailers failed to gain any significant traction, the company resorted to paying large streamers to play it on Twitch. But this created a flash of artificial hype that vanished the moment the sponsorship deals ended. Viewership cratered. There was no real dedicated community forming around the game. Perhaps the single biggest problem, however, was the one that no one on the outside could see. An investigative post-mortem of the project, later corroborated by multiple journalists, pointed to a bubble of toxic positivity inside Firewalk Studios. Crucial feedback on fundamental issues like character designs was reportedly dismissed, and any form of dissent was actively discouraged. Shielded from the harsh realities of player feedback by the dangerous belief that the project was too good to fail, it's alleged that executives just kept pouring money into a game that was already sinking. On August 23, 2024, Concord officially launched on PlayStation 5 and PC. The result wasn't a disappointment. It was a historic, industry-shaking catastrophe. On its launch day, the game failed to break 700 simultaneous players on Steam. To put that into perspective, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, another infamous flop from earlier in the year, at least launched to a peak of over 13,000 players, and that was considered an unmitigated disaster. Helldivers 2 had over 155,000. Concord's numbers weren't just bad, they were a statistical rounding error. It only got worse. A week after launch, the peak player count on Steam had collapsed to double digits at certain points, with a low of just 60 players online at one time. The player base wasn't just small, it was practically non-existent. It's estimated the game sold only around 25,000 copies in total, across both PC and PlayStation. For a reported $400 million investment, these numbers were apocalyptic. The fallout was swift, merciless, and decisive. On September 3rd, just 11 days after its release, Sony announced it was pulling Concord from all digital stores and would be taking it offline. The servers officially went dark 3 days later, on September 6th. In an almost unprecedented move for a major publisher, Sony issued automatic, full refunds to every single person who had purchased the game. Any lingering hope that Sony might rework the game and relaunch it as free-to-play was permanently crushed on October 29, 2024. In an internal memo made public, Sony confirmed the game was being permanently sunset. It was gone for good. But that same announcement revealed the true human cost of this failure. Firewalk Studios was being shut down, effective immediately. This wasn't just about a failed game or a financial write-off anymore. This was about the careers and livelihoods of the roughly 200 employees who had poured years of their lives into this project, only to suddenly lose their jobs. Their studio was being erased, and their work was being deleted from existence, all because of a series of executive miscalculations made far above their heads. Here's the most important thing to understand. Concord wasn't a freak accident. It was simply the most spectacular and expensive implosion of Sony's deeply troubled live service strategy. That grand plan for more than 10 online games had just slammed headfirst into a brick wall. The closure of Firewalk was not an isolated event. It was announced alongside the shutdown of Neon Koi, another live service-focused studio Sony owned, which was closed before it even had a chance to release a game. The shockwaves continued to spread. Cracks appeared elsewhere in the portfolio. The future of another announced live service title, Fair Game Dollars, became a huge question mark. Even Marathon, the highly anticipated revival from Bungie, the legendary studio Sony paid $3.6 billion for specifically to lead this live service charge, was delayed indefinitely following negative feedback from early tests. After writing off the reported $400 million disaster, Sony had little choice but to publicly admit defeat. Top executives confessed the strategy wasn't working as planned, with one stating they needed to learn to fail early and cheaply. The exact opposite of what had happened with Concord. By early 2025, reports confirmed that Sony was quietly canceling even more of its unannounced live service projects. It was a full-scale strategic retreat, back to the very thing that made the PlayStation brand a giant in the first place. High-quality, single-player narrative experiences. So, how does a company as successful as Sony lose a reported $400 million in just 14 days? It was never just one mistake. It was a complete and total cascade of failures. It started with a flawed corporate strategy to chase a market trend without fundamentally understanding the audience or the competition. It was amplified by pure hubris, an arrogant belief that a massive budget could compensate for a generic design, a baffling price point, and non-existent marketing. And it was all sealed by an internal culture that reportedly ignored every glaring warning sign, pushing forward to launch a product that was, for all intents and purposes, dead on arrival. Concord will forever be remembered as one of the most expensive and embarrassing flops in the history of gaming. It stands as a harsh lesson in the dangers of corporate groupthink and has become a symbol of gamer frustration with an industry that too often seems to put projected profits before players. And as the ashes of Firewalk Studios finally settle, one question hangs heavy over the entire 8AA industry. In the endless high-stakes chase for the next billion-dollar game, how many more studios have to burn before the strategy finally changes? The story of Concord is a brutal, almost unbelievable cautionary tale. It's a perfect storm of a corporate strategy completely disconnected from the reality of the market and the players. So I have to ask you, what do you think was the single biggest lesson Sony should learn from this? Was it the fatal $40 price tag, the generic design, or the insulated internal culture? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you find these deep dives into the industry valuable, consider subscribing.